Hi, I'm back again to rank more horror movies, just like last year. I wasn't actually sure if I was going to do this year, but I ended up watching, you know, a few horror movies, so I figured, why not? Just to clarify, I'm not planning on making this like a yearly thing or anything like that. Anyway, yeah, so here we are. I watched horror movies. I'm gonna rank them. I'm even later this year than I was last time, so that's pretty cool. And you know how tier lists work. Just my opinion, yada yada. You get it. Also, I'm gonna try to avoid huge spoilers, but in some cases there may be something specific that I want to talk about with a movie. One particular scene or something like that. So I'll try to avoid getting into like, oh, this is how the movie ends, by the way. But yeah, if there's one on here that you are interested in watching and you don't want to get spoiled for it, probably just skip it, you know. You know the drill. All right, so the first movie I watched this year is actually kind of interesting because there's a pretty big connection to last year's first horror movie, that being Skinamarink last time. This time it's Longlegs. And the two movies themselves aren't really similar. I mean, I guess there's a couple vague similarities, but there is actually kind of an interesting similarity in the reception and like the word of mouth around those two movies. See, for those who don't know or just don't remember, Skinamarink was very hyped up. Essentially, to my memory, some clips of it leaked somewhere, and people were really, really excited to see the movie. It was one of those things like everyone had to go see it. And then it came out, and people did see it, and it had kind of a mixed reception. See, on one hand, you had people saying, oh man, this is like one of the scariest movies I've ever seen. It's like, super atmospheric and well done. On the other hand, you also had people saying that it was completely boring and overrated and kind of shit. And very similar situation here with Longlegs. This movie, from my understanding, had a viral advertising campaign that really propelled it into the spotlight with I believe like a bunch of ARGs and like community wide puzzles and stuff, which is really cool. I wasn't even aware that was happening until after I watched the movie, unfortunately, but yeah, I mean, that sounds pretty cool to me, and a lot of people were really interested in it. Yeah, there was a lot of hype surrounding this one, and just like last time, people went to see it and mixed reception. Some people think it's really good, really like creepy and cerebral and just a well-produced movie. Um and on the other hand, again, you have a lot of people saying, well, I guess I got hyped up for nothing because it's kind of shit. I've definitely heard a lot from both sides on this one. And a big point of contention, it seems, would definitely be Nick Cage's performance as the titular long legs man, the man with the long legs. Some people found his performance to be kind of goofy more than actually scary, which I suppose I understand. As for my own personal take on the movie, well, yet again with another interesting connection to last year's first movie. I freaking loved it. I loved Long Legs. I thought this was a really good movie. I particularly enjoyed the atmosphere. Uncomfortable, I guess, would be a good word for it. It's a very uncomfortable movie, but like in a good way, you know? And I did very much enjoy Nick Cage's performance. I thought it was very creepy. The car scene, I'm sure you all know that. I I thought that was really cool. I think Nick Cage really throws himself into some of these roles, and it's a very hit or miss sort of situation where it's like if you connect with what he's doing, you're gonna love it. Otherwise, yeah, I do, like I said, I do understand why people found his portrayal to be more comedic than anything, but I don't know. It worked for me. It was very creepy in my opinion. Also, just kind of the vibe, the acting in this movie is almost kind of Lynchian in a way, in that it's very off-putting. This movie in general just feels off, but like intentionally so. And I love movies like that, that's I really enjoy that sort of vibe. And another thing to mention, the first scene in this movie, the one shot in the like sort of box aspect ratio. Ooh, really, really good scene there. That one definitely stuck with me. I really enjoyed the way they did that. Also, I liked the aspect ratio of that part, and I was hoping that that was going to be the aspect ratio of the entire movie. And then it wasn't. Big sad. But regardless, all things considered, I enjoyed this movie quite a bit. Putting that right up there in A tier, just like where Skinamarink went. It really is history repeating itself, I suppose, in some ways, but there you have it. I am a long legs enjoyer. I thought that movie was pretty good. Not perfect, far from perfect. The whole like, you know, big reveal, which I won't get into, but the whole big reveal was a little bit sloppily done, I suppose. It was there's a lot of very much like, hey, by the way, this is what was happening throughout the entire movie, just so you're aware. Hey, audience, this is what the movie was about. And it's like, yeah, okay. I get it, but like I don't know. I think the pros outweigh the cons on that one for me. Next up, a Korean monster movie called The Host, which I actually did not know until after watching this that this was directed by Bong Joon-ho, who you may know. I'm sorry if that pronunciation was terrible, by the way. Who you may know as the director of Parasite. And that movie is amazing. So, one could easily expect this one to also be very good, and it is. Like I said, I didn't realize at first who had actually directed the movie. I forget if I actually didn't realize that until after the movie, or if I like looked up someone halfway through and then figured it out. I don't know. Anyway, there are actually a few similarities to Parasite. Not only tonally, because this particular director, whose name I don't want to try to pronounce again for fear of humiliation, is very good at mixing tones, I think would be a good way to put it. His movies can kind of bounce back and forth between, oh, they're really serious in this scene, and then kind of comedic in this one. And then really sad, and then it's back to serious, and then comedic, and it's like it bounces back and forth between those things so much that you'd kind of think that it would be terrible. You would think that it would just be an absolute mess and it wouldn't flow at all, but somehow or other he manages to make it all work and just click together very well, which I think is very commendable. That's not an easy thing to do, mix tones like that, especially in a movie where there's, not as much runtime to kind of play around with that sort of thing as you would get in like, a TV show or some such. But yeah, that was great. I gotta also commend the visuals very heavily. This movie is super atmospheric. Just everything looks really cool, except for, unfortunately, the monster itself, which, while it does look it looks cool on its own, and it interacts with the world in a pretty cool way, but damn, man, it's got that real CGI look, that like 2000s CGI look, you know what I mean? Like, it is very, 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 very obviously CGI and kind of disconnected from the rest of everything that's happening. But, it is what it is. It's not a big deal. The story is also like very good and like surprisingly brutal at times as well. It's one of those movies where you start watching it and you're like, "Oh yeah, I know where this is going. I like get it." And then by the end you're like, "Oh shit." Damn. There's a lot of big twists and turns. And yeah, there's a few moments that I genuinely was not expecting to happen at all. So I really enjoyed this movie. I think I would put it probably another A tier actually for me. Not quite the S tier category. Oh man, now I have to choose between those two. No, I'll do that at the end. I'll do that at the end. We'll get more specific at the end. I'll figure this all out. But for now, that can just go right up there in A tier. It's about at the same level of enjoyment as Long Legs for me. I liked both of those quite a bit. And keeping things rolling right along with Noroi the Curse. Noroi? I don't know. Anyway, this movie slaps. This is a Japanese found footage mockumentary type thing about a guy who kind of like investigates these paranormal occurrences and ends up finding a little bit more than he bargained for. Now, that pitch may sound a little bit generic, and that's because the general themes of this movie are kind of generic, but they're done in a pretty unique way. And man, this movie has the vibes, it's got the atmosphere. It is very creepy and tense. It also, I'm pretty sure, has a song from The Thing in it that it uses a lot. It's either directly ripped from The Thing or it sounds almost exactly like a track from The Thing. I don't know why. I just thought that was funny. Kind of a random thing to bring up, I guess, but there you go. Yeah, I specifically don't want to give too much away about this movie. Just if you like found footage, if you like weird, creepy, slow burn, like folk horror, this one's up your alley probably. So you should check it out. Man, right there. There you go. I really liked that movie. Also, A tier is getting a little crowded already. We'll fill the rest of these out. Well, maybe. I don't know. We'll see. Next up, we got When Evil Lurks, which is a movie that I believe was released last year in 2023, I think. I actually hadn't heard of it until very recently. At least I don't think I'd heard of it. But man, this movie's pretty brutal, I'm not going to lie. There's some wildly fucked up themes and scenes and ideas and such in this movie. I think it's all handled very well. Essentially, this is a possession movie, but done in a very different way from what you're used to. This possession kind of acts more as like a contagious like virus, like a disease that spreads. And yeah, it's intense. There's a lot of pretty fucked up imagery in this movie, as well as just the story in general is very, again, intense. Just intense is the best word to describe it. It's also kind of depressing and it's just fucked up, man. I don't know what to tell you. It's also got some great performances, really good writing. The story is just complex enough to keep you very interested throughout the entire runtime, but without getting to the point of like, what the hell is even happening anymore? This is just, I don't know. I don't think I really have a whole lot in particular to say about this movie. It's just good. It's just a well designed horror movie that I would recommend to most fans of the genre. It's just a good movie, man. It's just a good movie. There, there we go again with A tier. The entire list is going to be A tier. No, it's not. Trust me, it's not. Next up, the new VHS movie, VHS Beyond. If you watched the last tier list I did, you'll probably already know that I'm a pretty big fan of the VHS series. I love these movies. I mean, they can be kind of stupid sometimes, but they're found footage anthologies, and I really like found footage, and I really like anthology style horror, so there you go. It's not really a whole lot to complain about there. As for this particular entry, I thought it was pretty good. There were a few shorts in here that I thought were kind of mediocre. To my memory, there wasn't any of them that were particularly like terrible. I don't remember being like, God damn, bro, can we just get through this shit already at any point during this? But I will say that there were only two in particular that like really stood out to me. That being the last one, not the connecting short, but like the last short, which I don't want to talk about at all because you should go into that knowing nothing. It's really cool. And then the skydiving one. I will say I didn't actually expect for VHS to go into like aliens. It's kind of neat that they're getting themed ones now, you know? Like it'd be interesting to see if they ended up doing, zombies or like psychological horror or something like that. But yeah, it was cool. I enjoyed it. Again, not a whole lot to say about it. It was just an all right one. Potentially one of the less memorable VHS movies aside from the two shorts I mentioned, but yeah, I think it was all right. They did a pretty good job with that one. I don't know why that was over there. Anyway, next up, we got a couple of classics here, Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead. Last October, I watched Night of the Living Dead, which was the first movie in this trilogy. And I had said for a while to myself that I might potentially watch the other ones at some point, but I just never got around to it until now. And man, am I glad I did, because I can definitely see a lot clearer now why people are such huge fans of this trilogy. Like, Night of the Living Dead was great. Don't get me wrong. I really liked that movie. And not just in the way of like, oh, it's a classic, it's just classic. No, I just thought it was a very well done movie. These, though, fantastic. Like some of the best zombie movies I've ever seen. These are great. Absolutely everything I want to see out of a zombie movie, honestly. Especially Day of the Dead, which I don't know if this is like a controversial take, but I think Day of the Dead might be my favorite of the trilogy. But these are fantastic. If you enjoy zombie media in general, you definitely have to give that whole trilogy a watch. Don't be like me and just watch Night of the Living Dead and be like, yeah, it was pretty cool. Like, no, 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 no. Watch them all. But man, yeah, these are great. Amazing stories, great performances. Lots of cool zombies, a lot of gore, especially for the time as well. Just it's what you want out of a zombie movie. These are like the quintessential zombie movies. There's a lot of scenes from them that genuinely stuck with me because like they're not scary, like not even remotely. Especially I don't even know if they would have been scary at the time. Maybe nowadays they're not even remotely scary, but the stories are very well done and you actually do get attached to the characters. You get attached to what's happening. You want to see it through, even though you know things are probably going to go badly. Just wonderful. I actually going to put both of these in S tier. I think, yeah, yep, that looks right to me. Just fantastic stuff. Also, like I said, surprisingly gory movies. They can be a little bit more brutal than you would imagine. Especially like that one scene in Day of the Dead where the dude is like getting his head ripped off and his vocal cords are like stretching. It's like, oh god. It's actually like surprisingly like, whoa. When did this come out? Hold on. Let me check that real quick. Which I guess, at the time that would have been at least relatively standard fare for a horror movie, I guess. But still, it's like, man, that's something you'd expect to see in like, I don't know, Saw or some like movie that's known for being especially brutal, I suppose. Anyway, yeah, great stuff. Watch these if you like zombies. Just watch these if you like horror. Watch these in general. Like even if you don't really care about horror, these are just good movies. Though you will definitely get more out of them if you're a horror fan. And then I watched Return of the Living Dead, and I don't want to talk about this one, man, because I have a take on it that a lot of people probably will vehemently disagree with. That being that I didn't really like it that much. I would be look, okay. I will fully admit I understand the appeal of this movie. I certainly do, and it has its moments. Tarman, that whole outfit was really well done. I also enjoyed the fact that the zombies were like nigh unkillable. Like I think didn't they manage to kill like one zombie in this movie permanently? It was very few, if anything. And I think that's actually kind of an interesting way of doing zombies where it's just like nah, these fuckers ain't gonna die. Like you Romero zombies, you can like shoot them in the head, you can like blunt force trauma, cut off their limbs, like run them over with a car or something. Like they'll go back to being dead quickly. These motherfuckers, they're just going to get back up. And that actually makes for a pretty interesting dynamic in my opinion because like with a lot of zombie movies, you sort of get this feeling of okay, but just shoot them, right? Like just shoot them. You've proven that you can kill them again, put them back in the grave. So just shoot them. Just use that axe. Don't like back away going, "Oh my god." Like just use the axe. You know what I mean? But in this movie, it really is just like I don't like what would I do? I don't freaking know. Run, I guess, but like they're kind of fast zombies, so it's not like that's going to make much of a difference. So that's cool. Also like the whole punk attitude of the movie is kind of fun as well. But I think specifically the problem for me was that this is a horror comedy at its core, and I just didn't find this movie to be very funny. And I think that's probably one of the main things that kind of turned me off to this movie. Like there were definitely a couple scenes that got a chuckle out of me, but for the most part, just didn't really hit. Just didn't really hit. And that kind of means that, with a horror comedy, you're balancing two separate genres. So if someone enjoys, me for example, the horror aspect of the movie, but not really the comedy, they're probably going to only be enjoying the movie about half the time. There were a lot of moments where they were just going on and on and on with like conversations that were clearly supposed to be funny, and I was just like, bro, I don't fucking care. Like I just move on. But yeah, again, I mean, this is again just my opinion. This tier list is just how much I enjoy the movies. And I mean no disrespect to this movie necessarily, nor, the people that really enjoy it. Because I know this is like a big cult classic, and a lot of people consider this like one of their favorite horror comedies, maybe even one of their favorite movies in general. And I get it. I do. But for me personally, it's like a C tier. It wasn't like bad. It didn't like insult me. I wasn't having a bad time with it. It just, it just didn't really hit me the way I thought it would. And a lot of the time during the movie, I was just kind of like, yeah, all right, it's fine, I guess. But moving on, we've got Oddity. Now this is a pretty creepy movie. This is directed by the same dude who did Caveat, which if you're familiar with that movie, you'll kind of have a similar vibe with this one in some ways. But I really loved that movie, so when I heard that this was a thing and it was made by the same person, I was like, "Oh hell yeah. I got to check this out." And I did, and I'm very glad that I did because Caveat is a good movie, but this blows it out of the water, dude. It is so good. So freaking creepy, man. It's like I think Longlegs was marketing itself as like the scariest movie of the year. Look, I like Longlegs, but I'm just saying, Doug, Oddity was scarier. It just was. For me anyway. Scariness is subjective, but I found Oddity to be much scarier, much more intense. And not really with the, like, wooden mannequin figure thing that's kind of a big part of the marketing for this movie, as far as I can tell. And a lot of people were really creeped out by it. I didn't really find that to be scary at all. It was like everything else. Just the the setting of the movie is just uncomfortable, man. It is rough. And that one scene, dude, with the jump scare, oh my god. I don't know if I've that got me worse than like most jump scares in recent memory. That was fucked. that was a mean jump scare, man, but like not an unfair one. It was totally earned. The weird kind of seance vibe of this movie is it's just very uncomfortable. It's very well done. I just have a lot of praise to heap on this movie. The performances are good, the writing is good. It's a like pretty interesting story actually when you start getting down to it and learning more about it. It's paced well. It's just good. Again, this is another one of those that I would just call like a very good horror movie. Again, I'm not really super sure where I would put this. Maybe like there. Maybe, yeah, something like that. I think this is scarier than Long Legs. I probably liked Long Legs a little bit more in general, but yeah, I think that looks fine for now. We'll mess with that later. Ugh. The tunnel. I don't want to talk about the tunnel, dude. Fuck. I didn't like this movie at all, man. I didn't like this movie at all. And I tried too, and you can tell the movie tried because there were a couple decent parts in it, but my goodness, this just flopped for me, dude. This is an Australian found footage mockumentary. I guess this was the month of found footage mockumentaries for some reason, since the next movie on this list is also a found footage mockumentary. And it's also Australian, so that's kind of weird. That wasn't intentional, I swear. And it's also better, but we'll get to that. The tunnel just has a lot of problems. I would say this is probably the most generic found footage movie I've ever seen. If you've seen any like standard found footage movie, you've seen the tunnel, and you're not going to be surprised by anything it does. It's very stock standard. There's really not much to talk about with it. It's just a found footage movie. The problems with it kind of start arising with the mockumentary aspect because the way this movie is framed, there are like interviews going on with the survivors of this incident, like from the very beginning of the movie, interspliced with the footage. That creates problems. First of all, you're telling me who survives the movie right out. Like, you're just straight up saying, okay, these are the people who survived the movie. So when something starts happening to them, there's no tension at all because I already know that they're being interviewed. They survived. So like, why should I be scared for them? Because I see them right here. They're fine. There's no story there. And also the other people that are with them. I wonder if the people who aren't getting interviewed might fucking die in the movie, dude. It's like so stupid. I don't understand why they framed it that way. It spoils everything in the movie. And there's no big twist. It's just that. It's just that. The people who survived survived, the people who didn't. And that's the movie. And it's just standard found footage walking around underground, and there's like a monster, and they're going, oh, be quiet, dude. You'll be quiet. I think it hurt us. It's like, that's the entire freaking movie, dude. That's it. And they try to like set up some like sub stories that never go anywhere. And okay. I'm getting ahead of myself. The other problem, I'm going to be ranting on this for hours. The other problem is the way that the interviews are framed are strange to me because there's a lot of like talking about nothing, and I would know because that's essentially what what these tier list videos are. So I'm an expert at that. But the thing is, I wouldn't put that in a freaking feature-length movie. Essentially, okay, here's an example. So, they're walking down, you see, like, footage of them walking down a corridor, right? It's like, okay, they're walking down a corridor, I understand what's happening. And then, cut to cut to the interview, and you have the guy going like, "Yeah, I felt my cord tug a little bit behind me, and I turned around and it got stuck on a nail." And it's like, fucking okay? Like, who cares? That's not relevant to anything that's happening. And that there's so much of that kind of stuff where it's just like the interviews just talk about completely irrelevant details. And it's also just like, bro, how are you remembering all of this? Like, you just went through probably the most traumatic, fucked up situation of your entire life, and you're sitting here talking about, like, technical issues you were having with your camera 3 weeks ago. It's like, how do you even remember that happened? What is... Oh! Sorry. But I think the most frustrating part of the tunnel is that it can be kind of good sometimes when it actually tries. There's one scene in particular, mild spoilers, I guess, but one scene in particular where if you've seen the movie, you probably already know which one I'm going to bring up. It's the one with the like security guard guy who's in the water, and they have like the night vision on or something. They like zoom in on him, and you see like it's all like quiet, and you see like his eyes are gouged out, and then the monster thing, whatever it is, comes up behind him and like grabs him and starts like slowly snapping his neck, and it's like, that's great. That's a great scene, actually. Too bad that's the only, like, decent part of the entire movie. Just look that scene up, watch it on YouTube, and you'll have gotten the best part of this movie. You don't have to watch the rest of it. And you know what? I would recommend doing that, because that scene is good. It's very good, actually, and I would recommend taking a look at it and skipping the rest of this. God, I don't think it's quite F tier for me. I think that one scene in particular kind of pulls it up out of the pit here. F tier for me is like a movie that I absolutely despised, you know. I think The Tunnel is more just kind of disappointing, kind of boring, and more so just not good, man. I just did not like that movie. I understand it does have its fans, and hey, you know, as always, if you like it, great. I'm very glad that you do. But it's not for me. All right, Lake Mungo. This is another one of those where I really just have to ask myself, like, man, I wonder why it took me so long to watch this. Because again, I'm a pretty big fan of found footage, and this is probably one of the more talked about and well-known found footage movies out there. And for good reason. I will say most of this movie isn't especially scary as much as it is just kind of depressing and surprising in some cases. This is more so, I would say, just a good story, just a good movie rather than a good horror movie specifically. However, there is the scene, you know the one. If you've seen it, you know the one. And that definitely firmly puts it in the horror category. Let's not mince words here. This is absolutely a horror movie. I'm just saying I think it kind of succeeds more as just a very interesting story rather than being like particularly terrifying. The themes of this movie are extremely terrifying. It's just like the moment to moment scenes of the movie aren't, you know, like nail-bitingly terrifying for the most part. They're just kind of interesting. And some very, very good acting, I gotta say. The people who acted in this movie did a pretty phenomenal job of playing just like your average Joe who has no fucking idea how to talk to a camera. Like, that sort of thing is a difficult thing for an actor to portray, I think, because you essentially have to be good at acting by being bad at acting. It's a weird thing. Respect to anyone who can pull it off, and the people who acted in this movie definitely pulled it off quite well. Yeah, it's good. I mean, it didn't quite make that A tier type of enjoyment for me, but I had a good time with it. I think it's worth watching for sure, especially if you're a found footage fan. It's got some pretty creepy scenes. I'll say that. Oh my god, speaking of creepy, freaking Audition, dude. Holy shit, this movie is fucked. This movie is fucked. I almost don't want to give anything away about this. Massive content warning for this one, but if you enjoy movies that by the end of them you'll just be staring dead-eyed at the screen going, shit, I kind of wish I hadn't watched that. Ugh. Like this is probably a good one. I don't mean that as in that this movie is bad or boring or anything. It's just a bad time in an intentional manner. In fact, though, now that I'm saying that, it is kind of boring for a good chunk of it. um, but that's sort of intentional. It kind of lulls you into this false sense of like, man, this is weird. I kind of thought this movie was going to be like really fucked up. I guess nothing interesting is really happening. Oh my. That's kind of what you got going on here. It's fucked up. It's kind of hard to watch in a couple places. It's awkward, it's weird, it's creepy, it's brutal. It's just a strange movie, honestly. I think I would put that like here. I wouldn't quite put it in that A tier category, but I'm glad I watched it, I think. I wouldn't probably watch it again, but it's an interesting kind of bizarre artistic experience in some cases. Give it a shot if it sounds interesting. But again, keep in mind it can get to be a lot in some points. Next up is Shudder. The original one, not the American remake. We don't do that here. No, no, no. Shudder is a good movie until the very end when it becomes great. It's kind of interesting actually because it has this sort of incremental nature to it, right? Where at first it seems like a pretty straightforward concept, but then it starts like bending its own story and making you go, wait, so, but they definitely did, but wait, but that's not, but hold on, that would mean, oh shit. It's one of those movies where you're just constantly kind of reevaluating what the story is, what's happening in it, and what's happening to the people in it. And it manages to pull all of that off without being frustratingly confusing, which is impressive to say the least. I have no idea how they managed to do that. But yeah, as this movie keeps going, it gets better. It's like it starts off as like, high C, low B, and that's like, oh, wait. Oh shit, it's getting good. It's getting good. And then at the end, it's like, oh damn. The ending is very creepy. It's great. It's really good. I think as an overall package, I would probably put the movie here at probably the top of B tier. You could make an argument for low A. I could make an argument for low A. I think there's a good spot for it. But I think it's definitely one that's worth watching. I certainly recommend it. It's a very solid movie. Again, this is another one of those that I don't want to get too deep into the actual story itself or even really talk about it at all because it's just so much better on a blind watch. Like I didn't really have any idea what the movie was about besides just like a very vague description of what like the first parts are like. And it was much better for that. So, yeah, give it a watch if it sounds interesting. But I will say, if you do give it a watch, give it time. Let it do its thing. Don't click off too early because like I said, at the very beginning, it is just kind of a standard horror movie, but it gets much better as it goes. So let it do its thing, and you may be surprised. You may be surprised by the end of it. So I only just now realized that this tier list maker website completely screwed up the order of these movies. So I did a few of those out of order, I think, but that's okay. Because now we get to talk about Versus, which I love. This movie is so good, dude. I just randomly heard about this. I decided to give it a watch. And man, I'm so glad I did. It's so cheesy. It's so over the top. It's so cool. This movie slaps to the utmost degree. It's amazing. It's essentially a bunch of yakuza fighting zombies in a forest, and it's also a samurai movie, but like a samurai zombie movie. If any of that sounds even remotely interesting to you, you're probably going to have a great time here. I know I did. Just make sure to go into this realizing that it is not going to be serious all the time. It knows when to actually take things a little more seriously, but there's a lot of scenes in this movie that are just balls out absurd. And I adore it for that. It is insane, man. The music is great. The cinematography is actually really good. There's some surprisingly beautiful shots in this movie. The story is weird, but kind of great at the same time. Performances are pretty good. Like, the combat is super fun. I believe it came out in 2000, so it's definitely got that, like, early 2000s Matrix-y kind of vibe. I mean, the protagonist literally puts on a trench coat and sunglasses, so there you go. So basically, if you hate that style of action and filmmaking, you will probably not enjoy this movie very much. But I loved it. And it's definitely a hidden gem as well. Like, I don't really hear people talking about this movie, like, barely ever. There's not that many videos on YouTube about it. Like, conversation about it is pretty limited. It's not very well known. But man, you gotta check this movie out. You gotta check it out. It's so good. Versus goes right there. Yeah. Again, if you think Yakuza with swords and guns, fighting zombies, and like having sword fights in a forest is, if you think that sounds like a fun movie, well, you're correct, first of all. And also, please watch Versus. Anyway, next up is the original 1931 Dracula movie. And this is kinda cheating to put this on here, since I actually rewatched a couple movies as well during October. And this tier list is supposed to be just of the movies I actually watched for the first time. But I'm not entirely sure. I feel like I've probably seen this one before, because I used to watch a lot of like old black and white monster movies and horror movies and stuff when I was younger. So I've probably seen it. Again, I don't know for sure, but I assume I saw this at some point. But at the very least, it's been a while since I saw it, and I didn't really remember too many aspects of it, other than obviously the fact that it's, Dracula. How does one even rank Dracula? How does one even rank one of these old Universal monster movies? Because like they're the OGs, they're like some of the original horror movies, and yet watching them today, it's fascinating, it's interesting, it's fun, it's cool, but like, do these stand up to modern filmmaking and storytelling? In some ways, absolutely. In others, maybe not so much. The pacing is kind of weird on this movie. I'm just going to be honest with that. Storytelling is just kind of strange from today's standards. But again, it's like, bro, this movie came out in freaking 1931. Like, there's no point in holding it to a modern standard. And even if you do, it still holds up pretty well. Like, yes, there's some pretty goofy parts. That scene especially where Van Helsing like holds out the cross and and Dracula just goes like, he like fucking, he just like runs away. It's fucking great. It's like it's stupid, but again, at the time, it probably wasn't all that unusual. And again, how do you even judge that? The movie came out almost a century ago at this point. But yes, again, there are aspects of the movie that still hold up to this very day. The writing is a little bit inconsistent, but the dialogue is actually pretty good still. The visuals are very striking to this very day. The acting also holds up shockingly well. I was especially impressed with the guy who played Renfield. I forget his name, but he did a surprisingly good job of playing a rather complicated role in that movie actually. Really good stuff. I don't know. Again, how do you even rank this? Because like if you're talking about influence, obviously there were horror movies before this. They can be traced all the way to the silent film era even, but like if you're talking about influence, like the Universal monster movies are like they're like some of the most influential horror movies ever. And yet, if you're talking about how it holds up to modern standards, it's good. It's not like one of the best movies ever made. But it's still solid. It's weird to rank something like Dracula because it's freaking Dracula. But I guess for this particular tier list, I am mostly just going off my own opinion, what I thought of the movies, and like my enjoyment level, right? Like that's where it is. And I think I would put it there. Again though, much respect to the movie. I just for me personally watching it, it was probably here. It was still good, but it's just weird to rank, man. I don't know. It's freaking Dracula. What do you want? All right, so oh god, Deadstream. This was a movie that I didn't have any interest in watching because the premise sounded kind of dumb to me, and it is. But it came highly recommended. I heard a lot of people really enjoyed this movie. The gist of this is that it's like this live streamer, like YouTuber dude who runs this like really shitty clickbait prank channel or like a stunt channel, I guess, like stunts and prank. You know the type. Like it's actually quite accurate to some of those types of channels, I will say. Especially the part where he like shills his merch at every given opportunity. That was pretty funny, I will admit. Yeah, essentially that type of guy decides to spend a night in a supposedly haunted house and it turns out to actually be haunted. Blah blah blah. This movie is not trying to take itself seriously at all. It's more comedy than horror, really. I heard some people comparing it tonally to like Evil Dead 2, but I feel like even Evil Dead 2 was like there were a couple moments that were a little bit more serious in Evil Dead 2. Not a lot of them. I would compare this tonally more to Army of Darkness personally, not in terms of quality, but again in terms of tone. It's just a comedy movie really with like some vague horror themes, I guess. I mean, it's not scary. I guess there's a couple moments that are kind of trying to be creepy, but for the most part, it's just supposed to be funny. And it sometimes is. I will say there were definitely a few moments in this movie that got a good laugh out of me. That being said, my main problem with this movie is that while it is indeed trying to be like awkward and cringe, there are some parts that are kind of just unintentionally cringe, Where it's like you're supposed to be like rolling your eyes and going, "Oh, this fucking idiot." Haha. But there were definitely some moments in the movie where I was like, "Oh, fucking hell, dude, seriously." Where it's like just such a dumb, stupid joke that you can tell it kind of goes beyond the sort of meta humor that they have going on into just being like, that was just straight up dumb. There's really not a whole lot of excuse for that one. That was just a straight up eye roll worthy joke. That being said, I don't know. I didn't hate it. Some of the practical effects were pretty fun, I guess. But I guess I would put it like there. It didn't really stand out all that much to me. I had fun watching it, but looking back on it, I don't really remember a whole lot. And what I do remember is just kind of like, it was all right, I guess. I wouldn't necessarily say I recommend that one, but I mean, if you really, really like horror comedies and you've seen a bunch of them, yeah, you might want to check it out. Next up, get out your arguably horror t-shirt and put it on. Put that t-shirt right on, because we've got The Devil's Rejects, which I would say qualifies as horror because it has some pretty fucked up imagery in it and is a very intense movie. For those of you who aren't aware, this is the sequel to House of a Thousand Corpses, directed by Rob Zombie. And I really liked House of a Thousand Corpses, and I also really liked this movie. I will say, though, that this one is definitely a lot grittier than its predecessor. Like, House of a Thousand Corpses was... It felt like a carnival ride, you know? Felt like a carnival ride through a haunted house. In fact, that kind of is in the movie. But, like, the whole movie kind of had that whole vibe. It was, like, paying tribute to Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It was... There was a bunch of, like, crazy, weird, stupid shit in that movie. Devil's Rejects is still pretty crazy, but it's a little bit more serious. In fact, it's quite a bit more serious. I enjoyed it quite a bit, though I will say there are a few really intense scenes in this movie. One in particular, really uncomfortable to watch. It's just ugh. Yeah, that scene is hard to watch, man. It really is. But anyway, there's one very strange thing that I realized about this movie after watching it, that being that apparently you're supposed to kind of like the three protagonists slash villains, because they are absolutely the villains of the story. You're kind of supposed to like end up sort of liking them by the end of it and being like, oh well, maybe they're not like they're horrible people, but like they're kind of funny. But like, I didn't get that at all, Doug. I didn't get that at all. Minor spoilers here, but the sheriff dude, I realized after watching the movie and watching a couple videos about it that apparently what you're supposed to think is that scene where the sheriff like kidnaps all of them and starts like torturing them is like whoa, dude, like that's fucked up, dog. He's like going down to their level. What the shit? Like he's a villain now. Apparently that's what you're supposed to think. I didn't think that at all. I was like fully on the sheriff guy's side the entire time, and I apparently was not supposed to be. That wasn't the intent. But like, dog, if you're gonna show me these three people being just horrifyingly fucked up and evil for like the entire first half of the movie or something like that, just absolutely abhorrent people, how am I supposed to feel bad for them? And also, how am I supposed to feel like the sheriff is the bad guy? I mean, yes, you know, I understand the morality of that situation is questionable at best, but it's still just like, damn, bro. But I guess without getting too much into that, it's still a fantastic movie. I don't even necessarily think that I would say that aspect of it is a downside. I think it's more just like more so morally complicated than one would imagine from something like this. Though again, I don't think that was the intent, and that's kind of the problem. Anyway, whatever. This is a surprisingly tightly written movie. It's got some great visuals. You know, say what you will about Rob Zombie as a filmmaker, the dude makes some visually nice looking movies. Like the locations and the sets and everything, it's all very nice looking. Well, I guess nice looking is the wrong word because it's a lot of it is very grimy and gritty, but like it's well done, I suppose would be a better way of putting it. Yeah, very intense story, but it definitely stuck with me, and I had a lot of fun with this movie. I have heard mixed things about the third movie in this trilogy, but you know, I'm probably putting this in A tier, like right there, I think. One Cut of the Dead. I don't want to tell you a thing about this movie because the more I say, the more it's going to get spoiled. So I will instead give you the very, very basic synopsis of people shooting a zombie movie end up running into actual zombies. And things take many twists and turns from there. Watch this one spoiler free. especially if you're like a big horror movie fan. And I think you'll get a good amount out of it. I'm just gonna put it there. I'm not gonna mention more about it because this is one of you're not gonna get a whole lot out of it if you already know what's happening. So just give it a watch if you're really into horror movies. That's all I'm gonna say about it. Malignant. This is actually another one that you should watch if you're really into horror movies. Let me put that back there for a sec. I loved Malignant. I thought this movie was amazing. It's another one of those where kind of like Shudder, it's like, oh yeah, no, that I get what's going on here. And then things just keep taking all these crazy twists and turns, and by the end you're just like, what the hell is even happening anymore? But like in the best possible way. This movie has one of the best like final thirds I've seen recently. It's insane and it's so cool and fun and so campy. This movie is very just absurd and unapologetically itself, you know? It's like it's not really trying to be anything other than Malignant. And I think that's really respectable. I enjoy the atmosphere, the performances are good, visuals are really really nice. There's a couple very kind of spectacularly cool looking shots in this movie. There's one like overhead shot where the protagonist is like running through the house and it's like following her through the house. It's cool. It's just really cool looking and it's fun and it's over the top and it's like it's violent and it's scary and it's this is just one of those movies. It's just like I can point at that and be like, that's an example of just a good horror movie that knows what it wants to be and it accomplishes that. I'd heard a lot of good things about Malignant, and I think that is well justified. Once again, we're getting a lot of A tiers this time, but that's just kind of the way it is, you know. Malignant goes probably right there. Well, maybe, I don't know. We'll mess with that in a second. We're almost at the end here. Only two more left, and the first one is Mads, which is a movie with a very cool poster. Look at that shit. That looks awesome. I hadn't really heard much about this until I just heard somebody say, yeah, this movie was pretty good. And then I was like, all right, sure, whatever, I guess. I think literally it was just, I had heard that the movie was okay, and I saw the poster and I was like, this is a cool poster. I want to watch this. And then I watched it. What I will say about Mads is that it is a little bit generic. Like once you figure out exactly what's going on, you're not really going to be surprised by like any of the big twists and turns or anything because it's just like it's a pretty standard fare for what it is. But there is like the first quarter to the first third or so of the movie is by far the best in my opinion. It's essentially this dude takes this new drug, has no idea what it is, which is always a great idea, by the way. Then he meets someone on the road in his car as he's driving, which is also a great idea. Just driving is a wonderful thing to do after taking a brand new, completely undocumented street drug. So essentially, I like to think of Mads as a story about a man who is committed to making all the wrong decisions in his life, and that just continues on throughout the movie. it's quite something. But yeah, essentially, the first parts of this movie are great because it's got this weird atmosphere, and the sound design I especially have to give special credit to here because whoever was on the sound design team did a great job. Kind of the fun, confusing part is where you're like, well, wait, what's actually going on here? And like how much of this is just because this dude is like wicked fucking high, you know? It's got just like a very overwhelming soundscape and the way it's shot is great. It definitely puts you in the shoes of someone who just snorted a mystery substance. Right? So, again, kind of generic. It's not like the most interesting movie you'll watch, but it's well done for what it is, and it's got its moments. It's got its moments. I'm gonna put Mads like probably there. I think there's a good point. And then finally, The Hills Have Eyes, which I did not watch on Halloween because I watched The Thing on Halloween. John Carpenter's The Thing, which is one of the best movies of all time, and I will not tolerate a single person disagreeing with that opinion. But that's not on this list because I've seen The Thing like a lot of times, many times. The Hills Have Eyes is fantastic. This movie was on my watch list for quite some time, and I just never really got around to it. I really liked Texas Chainsaw Massacre when I watched that, and I'd heard that, Hills Have Eyes, like that's Hills Have Eyes and Texas Chainsaw are typically mentioned in the same sentence, as like the kind of grimy 70s horror movies. And I love grimy 70s horror movies. So again, it's kind of one of those situations where it's like I can't really explain why it took me as long to watch this as it did, but man, I liked this movie a lot. I would actually say in some places it kind of surpasses Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Like I don't know if that's like considered blasphemous to say as a horror fan or something, but like I don't know, dude. There were a couple moments in this where I was like, man, is this like kind of better than Texas Chainsaw? I don't know. At the very least, I think I would put them at about the same level for me. These are both classics. They're both fantastic. The Hills Have Eyes in particular captures that same kind of like cruelty from Texas Chainsaw where you're watching and you're just like, man, this sucks. But like again, I keep bringing this up, but in a good way though, cuz like that's the intention of the movie and all of that. But man, yeah, there's some pretty gruesome shit in this movie to be honest. Essentially, I'm sure most people already know this, but Hills Have Eyes is basically just a story about just your average run of the mill American family that gets stranded in the middle of nowhere, and there's a bunch of crazy inbred cannibals that try to kill them. And that's it. That's pretty much the premise of the movie, but it's done very well. The atmosphere is great. Acting is, again, surprisingly great because, like, from this era of horror movies, the acting can be a little shaky sometimes because, especially like in the 70s, horror was starting to get like really kind of sensationalist and exploitative. So the acting could kind of go either way at that era, but the acting is pretty good here. It's got a lot of great moments. Its ending is kind of surprising actually as well. I won't get into that obviously if you haven't seen it, but I was surprised by the ending. I'll say that. This is just good. It's great actually. It's a classic. I'm gonna put it in S tier. I think I really am because it left me with more of an impact than I actually thought it would. All right, let me try to see if there's any changes I would make here. Kind of want to put this here actually, and like this like yeah, but nah though. That can go there actually. Yeah. All right. Yeah, I think that's looking pretty good. Once again, the F tier, barren, but as I've said previously, I like to mostly watch movies that I think I'm going to enjoy, and most of the time I'm at least kind of right, as you can see. Like B tier and higher is all like movies that I really liked. C tier is just like didn't really have too many opinions either way. And then the only one in D the tunnel. Uh, but yeah, I think that's a pretty good ranking. I really liked most of the movies that I watched this year, as you can see. As per usual, a pretty top heavy list, but hey, that's all right. That's all right. I think that's a good thing personally. So yeah, thanks for watching or listening or whatever, if you actually made it this far. I hope you enjoyed listening to me ramble on about horror movies because I really enjoy talking about horror movies. So Again, if you made it this far, whether you actually watched it or just had it on in the background while you're doing something else or whatever, yeah, thanks for watching. I appreciate that. And I hope you had fun. And yeah, I guess that's about it. Have a good one, people.